Did you know the quietest moves in a trade war are sometimes made by your friends? Mexico and Canada, nations that once bragged of zero-mile supply chains with Detroit and Dallas, just slapped Washington with the very tariffs America invented, turning ally into avenger overnight. The walls we built to keep jobs at home have become price tags on our own exports. The handshake across the Rio Grande now feels like a closed fist around Midwestern corn and Rust Belt steel. If you care about where America's economy is really headed, tap like and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next shift. And trust me, some of the countries on this list will sting more than China ever could, especially number 5. What happens when the world no longer waits for America? If the flag still flies but not on the deal, is the deal still ours? First stop, the northern border, where friendship once crossed both ways like a daily commute. On the Trans-Canada Highway outside Sault Ste. Marie, convoys of US flatbeds loaded with specialty steel now idle in makeshift gravel lots, engines ticking in the cold while drivers scroll for new orders that never come. The Algoma furnace behind them still glows, but its billets are no longer earmarked for Midwestern assembly lines. They're ticketed for Shanghai shipyards and Riyadh skyscrapers, prepaid in currencies Washington can't touch. Back in Washington, the goal was simple: hike steel and aluminum tariffs by 50% to protect domestic jobs. But across the border, Ontario's mills saw something else, a buyer vacuum, and moved fast. Long-term contracts with China, prepaid, delivered, turnkey. Not a penny of duty in reverse. The retaliation was swift and surgical. Ottawa's March 13th countermeasure slapped a mirror image 25% duty on $29.8 billion worth of US output. From Michigan's rolled coil to Ohio's cast iron cookware, even the wrench sets stacked at hardware chains along rural Route 66. Overnight, the playing field wasn't leveled, it flipped. Buyers who once prized a Made in USA stamp now weigh an extra quarter of the cost at checkout and walk away. Investment didn't trickle down, it evaporated. County commissioners from Erie to Elkhart tried late-night calls to Ottawa, pleading for exclusions. Silence spoke louder. Rail spurs that rattled with midnight freight now sit under wind-blown rust, and even the truck stop coffee shop across from Gate 3 stains fewer paper cups each dawn. The silence is louder at the border warehouses where motion activated. Lights flicker over pallets that should have been gone by Easter. Forward contracts get torn up like old tickets to a cancelled show. Small towns hear a new sound every night at shift change. Nothing. It wasn't a policy shift. It was the sound of machines stopping for good. The echo from Canada hasn't even faded when the southern frontier fires back. Dawn over Garden City, Kansas, should smell like fresh milled grain. Instead, it reeks of diesel from locomotives that never leave the siding. Yellow mountains of number 2 Dent Corn Tower behind locked chain link. Tarps whipping loose in a prairie wind that carries no buyers. 900 miles south in Veracruz, longshoremen unload identical kernels from Brazilian barges. Their paperwork pre-cleared, their tariffs waived. The radio in the control tower broadcasts Norteño songs and a single fact. The price per bushel no longer cares about Nebraska. Even as US farmers waited nervously for price floor bailouts, Mexico was moving on. The ink dried on fresh MOUs with Brazil, Argentina, and even South Africa, locking in grain for 3 full seasons, paid in digital pesos that sidestepped the dollar entirely. After decades of NAFTA-era corn diplomacy, Washington believed every tortilla began in an Iowa field. What followed wasn't noise, it was silence. A quiet exodus of contracts worth billions, signed over a video call, finalized before anyone in Des Moines finished morning chores. Feedlot owners along Highway 54 scan spreadsheets that bleed red. Elevators rent extra tarpaulins. Crop insurers rewrite risk tables. It isn't the volume, it's the message. Reciprocity is optional. Local bankers whisper about Plan B loans that convert drying bins into ethanol stills. County fairs swap prize pork for cooking oil contests. Meanwhile, Mexican consumer groups celebrate cheaper imports that dodge America's tariff crossfire entirely. The policy was meant to shield Midwestern jobs, but it armored competitors instead, leaving Kansas with silos full of yesterday's advantage. If this is what winning looks like, why does it taste like unsold grain? Scroll east across the map, past empty rail yards and silent grain bins, and the battleground jumps from cornfields to code. In New Delhi's Connaught Place, a neon canyon of fintech billboards, app developers huddle over laptops while a new 30% sovereign data fee flashes on their dashboards. Almost instantly, every US subscription from cloud storage to dating swipes costs more in rupees than in dollars, and the surcharge flows straight into India's Digital Public Infrastructure Fund. Rather than waiting on global consensus, India acted. A new chapter of data sovereignty tariffs hit every download, ad impression, and offshore packet. Silicon Valley's dreams of endless scroll time? Now taxed, tracked, and rerouted. Legacy relationships shiver. Tech giants once treated India as limitless frontier. 750 million smartphones, a billion dreams, endless scroll time. Now they face gatekeepers armed with tariffs rather than firewalls. Venture capitalists shift pitch decks toward homegrown, made-in-Bharat platforms. Bangalore accelerators hand out stickers that read, "Keep the value here." The duty was framed as digital fairness, so why are local rivals raising Series C rounds while US founders draft exit slides? Startups that counted on cheap American APIs suddenly rewrite code to avoid them. Freelancers bill in INR plus levy. Consumers, some grumble, most adapt. Wallet apps auto-bundle the tax into one seamless tap. No protest, just drift. Apple, Google, Amazon, Netflix, all hit, all paying, all recalculating. Whether it's bandwidth, banking, or basic search, the surcharge sticks and the shift is already done. Cross the Atlantic, and the tariff backlash takes a more luxurious form, precision-tuned and polished in Chrome. At Charleston's Pier 31, rows of US-built BMW X5s wait quietly for clearance that may never come. Each SUV, crafted in South Carolina for export to Europe, now faces a steep new EU luxury equalization duty, a penalty aimed directly at American final assembly plants. Back in Munich, the move wasn't retaliatory, it was strategic. Germany's auto executives preempted the blow. Spartanburg production is being scaled back. Leipzig is already ramping up. New parts contracts have shifted east to Poland and the Czech Republic. And just like that, what was once made in America is now shipped around it. Stateside, the fallout is material. Seat fabric suppliers in Georgia are told to pause inventory. Shift workers at the plant face shortened weeks. Regional, freight hubs see fewer manifests. The hit isn't loud, it's logistical and relentless. Even as Washington claims tariff victory, Germany wins the reroute. Low-emission steel, EU carbon credits, streamlined logistics, they're all working against us. The result? American vehicles sitting idle in ports, while German-built models glide tariff-free across borders. No headlines, no protests. Just disappearing volume. It was supposed to bring the jobs home. Instead, it drove the profits elsewhere. Across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is redrawing its shopping list, and US farmers aren't on it. At Southampton docks, crates once filled with Midwestern grain now arrive empty or half-stocked. Importers cite volatility, delays, and a quiet reality. Britain no longer waits for American harvests. In supermarket warehouses, barcodes on beef and soy trace back not to Texas or Iowa, but to Canada, Australia, and Brazil. Just as Washington pitched post-Brexit trade as a golden opportunity, Westminster pivoted instead, signing fast-track agreements with the CPTPP bloc and rebooting food safety standards that quietly disqualify most US producers. Behind closed doors, British negotiators refer to US meat as regulatory risk. Across the aisles, grocers celebrate deals with New Zealand lamb exporters and pesticide-free soybean providers from Latin America. American suppliers, once seen as staples, are now treated as variables, too late, too inconsistent, too politically exposed. Midlands food distributors that once relied on Missouri corn now stock protein-rich peas from Canada. A London-based importer summed it up best. Reliability has borders. We're done waiting. It wasn't a dramatic break. No speech, no insult, just a soft refusal, layered in compliance codes. And for US agriculture, a disturbing trend. Allies who no longer answer the phone because they've already filled the cart now shift east to the trade giant that never needed volume to make a statement. In ports like Ningbo and Qingdao, American goods still arrive, but fewer make it through, not because of tariffs, because of silence. Entry inspectors now require national compliance certifications for everything from semiconductor tools to energy control systems, documents no US company can produce. No outright bans, no official blacklists, just impossible checklists that shift weekly. Back in Washington, policymakers still frame China as a tariff target. But in Beijing, the tools of rejection have evolved. Instead of slapping labels on crates, customs officials leave forms blank, then cite pending clarification. Meanwhile, competitors from Germany and Korea clear the same gates unbothered. Exporters in Texas and Oregon, caught in limbo, start redirecting shipments to Southeast Asia or scrapping orders entirely. What began as retaliation has matured into something colder: invisibility. American companies can't protest what hasn't been denied, and that's the point. Factories that once specialized in high-end components now sit at 60% capacity, blaming regulatory fog. Beijing doesn't need to ban products, it just needs to outlast the paperwork. Sometimes exclusion doesn't come from a blockade, just a locked door and no buzzer. In Canberra, the tone wasn't angry, it was clinical. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Australia's Treasury unveiled a new policy dashboard labelled US Trade Dependency Reduction 40% by 2026. No press fanfare, no fiery speeches, just numbers and action. The shift didn't come overnight, but when it came, it was surgical. Procurement for robotics was rechanneled to Japan, pharmaceuticals, India, green hydrogen, Germany. Each contract peeled away a layer of reliance until the supply chain no longer pointed across the Pacific. Darwin's undersea data cables, once routed through Oregon, now link straight to Singapore. Rare earth processing, previously reliant on US tech, now runs with Korean financing. And defense acquisitions, competitive tender only, no Buy American preference attached. For decades, Australia stood as America's southern anchor, a partner in war games, wheat exports, and diplomatic echo chambers. But now that loyalty is being measured differently, in resilience, not rhetoric. While Washington focuses on shoring up chips, Australia has quietly restructured its entire trade spine. Not out of defiance, but necessity. The next crisis, whether be it economic or geopolitical, won't wait for a waiver from Washington. They once rolled out red carpets. Now they roll steel, just not for us. It wasn't a breakup. It was a blueprint. 7 countries, 1 pattern, from Canada's steel to India's data, from Britain's grocery chains to China's invisible walls. America's closest partners are no longer playing by Washington's rules, not out of anger, out of calculation. They didn't hold press conferences, they just rewrote the terms and walked away. Mexico found new farms, Germany rerouted factories, Australia budgeted us out entirely. And through it all, the message is clear. Access to the US market is no longer the finish line. It's just one option among many. The world didn't revolt. It reorganized. If the next trade deal arrives without an American flag on the table, who gets to write the terms? And more importantly, will anyone still be waiting for us to show up? Tap like, subscribe, because this shift isn't coming, it's already here.